Most people don't struggle with difficult conversations because they don't know what to say. They struggle because their emotions take over before their mind can catch up. You've been there. Someone says something unfair, accusing, disrespectful, and suddenly your heart starts racing, your thoughts get loud, and you either freeze or explode. And afterward you think, I should have said this. I should have handled that better. Today, you're going to learn how to walk into difficult conversations calm, confident, and in control, no matter how emotional the other person becomes. When a difficult conversation begins, most people feel it instantly in their body. Your chest tightens, your stomach churns, your thoughts start racing, and before you know it, your emotions have already taken control. The first thing to understand is that your emotions are not the enemy, but they are a signal that something important is happening. If you react immediately, without pausing, you are letting the other person control the entire conversation. They may think they're attacking your logic or your decisions, but what they're really doing is pushing buttons. And the key to handling this effectively is to remain grounded. Staying grounded isn't about suppressing your feelings, pretending nothing affects you, or being robotic. It's about anchoring yourself in the moment so that your mind can work clearly while your emotions are present but contained. The moment you feel your heartbeat rising or your voice tensing, you need to intentionally slow yourself down. Take a deep breath, let your shoulders drop, and allow a small pause before responding. Even a few seconds can give your brain enough time to shift from a reactive mode into a responsive one. When you remain grounded, you create a space between stimulus and reaction, the space where you regain control. You don't need to argue, justify, or defend right away. Simply holding yourself steady communicates more strength than words ever could. People often underestimate how powerful calmness is. Someone raising their voice, being aggressive, or making unfair accusations expects a mirror of their energy, but when you remain composed, their intensity loses impact. Grounded presence allows you to see the conversation for what it really is, not a personal attack, not a test of your patience, but a moment that can be navigated with clarity. It allows you to listen actively, pick up on what is truly being said versus what is being thrown at you, and choose your response rather than being hijacked by your instincts. Grounding yourself also gives you the ability to maintain consistency in your message. When emotions take over, your words often scatter, your tone fluctuates, and your intent becomes lost in the chaos. By staying grounded, you ensure that your words, your voice, and even your body language all align with your true intent, giving you authority and presence that commands respect even in the most difficult exchanges. When most people enter a difficult conversation, they focus almost entirely on what they're going to say, crafting arguments, explanations, and defenses, but they completely forget the power of how they say it. Tone is far more impactful than the words themselves. You could be speaking the truth, laying out facts, or making the most logical point in the world, but if your tone carries frustration, impatience, or defensiveness, your words lose their weight and your message gets distorted. Tone communicates emotion before words ever land, and it sets the emotional stage for the entire interaction. People listen first to how something is said and only later to what is said. If your tone is sharp, condescending, or aggressive, even the most reasonable point will be met with resistance or hostility. Conversely, a calm, steady tone can disarm tension, diffuse anger, and create space for understanding, even when the subject is charged or uncomfortable. Controlling your tone doesn't mean being monotone or robotic. It means being deliberate with the way your voice carries authority, composure, and clarity. It's about slowing your speech just enough to be intentional, lowering your pitch slightly to convey steadiness, and maintaining even pacing so that your words have weight. It's about letting silence exist in between sentences instead of filling every gap with defensiveness or over-explaining. When you control your tone first, choosing your words becomes far easier because your mind is calmer and your body isn't reacting impulsively to the other person's energy. You gain the ability to speak with precision, to emphasize what matters without giving power to the things that don't. Tone is also contagious. If someone comes at you with anger or frustration, matching it will escalate the conversation, but a controlled tone can influence the other person's emotional state without you saying anything extra. It signals that you are composed, you are present, and you are in control of yourself, which in turn communicates that you expect the same from them. Mastering tone before words allows you to maintain credibility and authority, keeps the focus on the conversation rather than the conflict, and makes it far more likely that your message will land exactly as intended because your presence supports your words, giving them impact that mere facts or arguments alone could never achieve. One of the most common mistakes people make in difficult conversations is feeling compelled to explain themselves. The moment someone challenges you, accuses you, or speaks in a way that feels unfair, our instinct is to justify, clarify, or defend. We believe that if we simply explain our side, the other person will understand, the tension will dissolve, and everything will go back to normal. But that is rarely how it works. Explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening is like pouring water into a cup that has a hole in it. No matter how much you pour, it will never stay. The more you explain, the more frustrated you become, and the more likely you are to give them additional material to misinterpret, twist, or argue against. People who are not willing to listen are not listening to understand. They are listening to respond, to push their own agenda, or to confirm their own beliefs. Every explanation you offer becomes a weapon in their hands, not a bridge to understanding. The key is recognizing when someone is truly listening and when they are not. It takes awareness and self-control. Before you say anything, observe how they react to simple statements. Are they absorbing the words calmly, or are they interrupting, debating, or dismissing you? If it's the latter, then any explanation you offer will not land in the way you intend. At that point, the most powerful choice is to stop trying to convince them, stop over-explaining. Instead, make your point calmly, clearly, and succinctly, and then step back. It's not about arrogance, pride, or shutting the other person down. It's about protecting your energy and maintaining your clarity. Every unnecessary explanation drains you, weakens your presence, and often escalates the conflict instead of resolving it. When you resist the urge to explain to someone who isn't listening, you regain control over the conversation and over your own emotional state. You focus your energy on what truly matters, not on trying to win someone over who has no intention of understanding. You give yourself the space to respond thoughtfully to what is real and actionable, rather than being trapped in a cycle of endless explanations and defensive arguments that achieve nothing. It is in these moments, when you choose restraint over reaction, that you demonstrate self, respect, and authority, and you teach the other person without words how they should engage with you. One of the most misunderstood aspects of handling difficult conversations is the concept of boundaries. Many people think boundaries are about being confrontational, loud, or aggressive. They imagine that setting a boundary means raising your voice, pointing fingers, or making the other person feel small. But true boundaries are nothing like that. Boundaries are not about controlling someone else. They are about controlling yourself, protecting your space, and communicating what is acceptable and what is not in a clear, calm, and unwavering way. The first thing to understand is that boundaries only work when they are firm but composed. If your delivery is harsh or emotional, it becomes a conflict instead of a boundary. When you set a boundary, your tone, your body language, and your words must all align. You want to project steadiness, not anger, authority, not intimidation. For example, instead of saying, "Don't ever speak to me like that again," which can sound like a threat, you can say, "I cannot continue this conversation if it stays disrespectful," which is factual, calm, and communicates the same limit without escalating tension. Boundaries are also about timing and focus. You don't have to deliver them in the heat of a moment. Sometimes the best boundaries are set with a pause, a breath, and a deliberate choice of words. This gives your words weight because they are coming from a place of control rather than reaction. Another crucial aspect is simplicity. Boundaries should be direct and unambiguous, without excessive explanation, justification, or emotion. The simpler and clearer the boundary, the less room there is for misinterpretation or argument. When you set a boundary without sounding aggressive, you are demonstrating strength and self-respect. You are showing that you value yourself enough to define what is acceptable and unacceptable in your interactions. You are not trying to change the other person, you are simply defining your terms. And this approach often encourages the other person to respond differently because they see that the boundary is non-negotiable, steady, and calm. Over time, consistently setting boundaries in this way reshapes the dynamic of your interactions, not through conflict, but through the quiet authority of self-respect, and it allows difficult conversations to remain focused, controlled, and productive instead of spiraling into arguments fueled by emotion and misunderstanding. One of the most underrated tools in any difficult conversation is the simple act of pausing before you respond. Most people feel pressured to fill every silence, to immediately answer, explain, or justify themselves the moment something challenging is said. That urgency is exactly what makes conversations spiral out of control. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a signal of control, presence, and thoughtfulness. When you pause, even for just a few seconds, you create space between the stimulus and your reaction. That space allows your mind to catch up to your emotions, to assess the situation clearly, and to choose words deliberately rather than impulsively. Without that pause, your responses are often reactive. You may speak from frustration, anger, or defensiveness, and those words rarely accomplish what you hope. A pause, however, is a form of power. It tells the other person that you are fully present, that you are not being rushed, and that you are considering your words carefully. It also shifts the dynamic subtly in your favor because most people are uncomfortable with silence. When the other person realizes there is a pause, they begin to fill it themselves, which can lead to them revealing more than they intended or softening their tone. Pausing is also about emotional regulation. The physical act of taking a breath, letting your shoulders relax, or counting to 3 before responding lowers the body's stress response and allows clarity to emerge. In a heated conversation, this can prevent escalation and prevent words that would later be regretted. Silence gives your mind the ability to prioritize what is important, to separate facts from emotion, and to respond in a way that keeps the conversation focused rather than reactive. It is a way of maintaining authority without raising your voice or becoming defensive. Most people underestimate how uncomfortable silence can feel to someone who is trying to provoke a reaction, but this discomfort works in your favor because it encourages reflection and often de-escalates tension. Learning to pause before responding transforms difficult conversations from chaotic battles into controlled exchanges. It creates the mental and emotional space to observe, understand, and respond with precision, clarity, and impact rather than being swept away by the energy of the moment. One of the biggest traps in difficult conversations is the idea that you have to win. People approach tough discussions thinking that if they don't dominate, prove their point, or emerge right, they have somehow failed. But conversations are not battles and people are not opponents. The real goal is clarity, not victory. Focusing on clarity means you shift your energy from trying to convince, persuade, or overwhelm the other person to making sure your message is understood exactly as you intend. Clarity is about being precise with your words, simple with your explanations, and consistent in your tone and delivery. It's about removing anything that could confuse or cloud your meaning. When you are focused on winning, your words often become defensive, emotional, and convoluted. You add unnecessary justifications, arguments, and details that only serve to complicate the conversation and escalate tension. The other person feels attacked, misunderstood, or overwhelmed, and the conversation derails. Clarity, on the other hand, requires calmness, self-control, and presence. It requires you to observe the dynamics of the conversation, notice how the other person is responding, and adjust only to ensure your point lands clearly without feeding the emotion of conflict. When you focus on clarity, you also gain the ability to repeat, rephrase, or simplify without frustration because your goal is understanding, not victory. This approach changes the energy of the conversation entirely. The other person may be loud, accusatory, or emotional, but your clarity becomes a stabilizing force. They can argue, interrupt, or react, but your message remains anchored and comprehensible. Focusing on clarity also reduces internal tension. You stop obsessing over whether you won or lost, and you redirect that energy to being precise, deliberate, and thoughtful in what you communicate. It allows you to respond to questions or accusations without adding emotional fuel, without getting defensive, and without escalating the interaction unnecessarily. Clarity also communicates respect. Respect for the other person's ability to understand, respect for the conversation itself, and respect for yourself and your boundaries. When your words are clear, your intentions are clear, and your presence is steady, you no longer feel the need to fight for control because clarity naturally commands attention and ensures your message lands exactly as it should. One of the most powerful skills you can develop in difficult conversations is the ability to detach from the other person's emotions. When someone is angry, frustrated, or upset, it's easy to absorb their energy, to feel yourself getting pulled into the storm, and to start reacting emotionally. Most people make the mistake of matching the other person's energy, either by getting defensive, frustrated, or argumentative, and in doing so, they lose control over the conversation. Detachment doesn't mean being cold, indifferent, or dismissive. It means observing their emotion without letting it dictate your own. It means understanding that their feelings, while real to them, are not your responsibility to fix or absorb. When you detach, you create a mental and emotional buffer that allows you to think clearly, speak intentionally, and maintain control of your own responses. You can hear anger without becoming angry, criticism without feeling criticized, and blame without feeling blamed. This space allows you to respond strategically rather than react impulsively, which is the difference between effective communication and escalating conflict. Detachment also gives you perspective. You can notice patterns in their behavior, distinguish what is actually being communicated from what is simply emotional noise, and focus on the substance of the conversation rather than being distracted by intensity. It also allows you to maintain empathy without being consumed by it. You can recognize that their emotion is valid from their perspective without making it your problem, which keeps the conversation productive and prevents escalation. The act of detachment requires practice and mindfulness because your natural instinct is to respond to emotion with emotion, to defend, justify, or push back. But with deliberate focus, you can observe the emotional energy, acknowledge it internally if needed, and respond in a way that is calm, clear, and measured. Detachment also communicates strength. It tells the other person that while they may be experiencing intense emotion, you are steady, in control, and not subject to being hijacked by their energy. Over time, this skill transforms difficult conversations. It allows you to remain centered, respond with precision, and guide the interaction toward resolution rather than being swept up in conflict. By detaching from the other person's emotions, you reclaim authority over yourself, preserve your clarity, and create the conditions for a conversation that is constructive, focused, and anchored in presence rather than reaction. One of the most important lessons in handling difficult conversations is knowing when to end them. Many people feel obligated to continue a conversation no matter how disrespectful, aggressive, or toxic it becomes. They worry that leaving will make them appear weak, that they are failing to assert themselves, or that walking away will let the other person win. But continuing a conversation once it has crossed the line into disrespect does not show strength. It shows a lack of boundaries and self-control. Ending a conversation doesn't have to be dramatic, aggressive, or confrontational. It is not about creating conflict. It is about maintaining your integrity and your peace of mind. When someone begins to speak in a way that is insulting, demeaning, or deliberately hurtful, you have the right and the responsibility to step back. You can do it calmly, clearly, and firmly without needing to justify yourself or explain your departure. A simple statement delivered with composure is enough to convey your boundary. You might say something like, "I'm going to step away now." We can continue this conversation when it is respectful. That's it. No shouting, no emotional confrontation, no attempts to argue. The moment you step away from disrespect, you are reclaiming control over the interaction and over your emotional state. Walking away is also a teaching moment without words. It communicates that disrespect is unacceptable, that your presence is not available for chaos or abuse, and that the responsibility for maintaining a civil conversation lies with both parties. Continuing to engage when disrespect is present only feeds the conflict and reinforces negative patterns. It drains your energy, clouds your judgment, and often leads to regrets about what was said or how the conversation unfolded. By ending conversations that turn disrespectful, you protect your clarity, preserve your emotional stability, and send a clear signal about the standards you hold for communication. It is a demonstration of strength, self-respect, and emotional intelligence. It also allows you to re-enter the conversation later, if needed, with a calm and focused mind rather than being caught in the heat of hostility. Recognizing the point at which a conversation is no longer productive and having the courage to step away is one of the most powerful skills in communication. It ensures that every interaction you have is anchored in respect, dignity, and control rather than being hijacked by anger, hostility, or chaos, and it empowers you to handle fewer conversations with the same clarity, composure, and authority. At the end of the day, handling difficult conversations is never about proving a point or winning an argument. It's about maintaining your clarity, your presence, and your integrity in the midst of tension. It's about understanding that your power is not in matching someone's intensity, defending yourself endlessly, or controlling their behavior. Your power lies in how you show up, in how you manage yourself, and in the boundaries you set without drama. Difficult conversations will always trigger emotions, and they will always test your patience, but they also give you the opportunity to demonstrate composure, confidence, and self-respect. Every pause, every measured word, every boundary you set, and every moment you choose clarity over chaos reinforces the kind of presence that cannot be shaken. You will not control the other person, and you will not always control the outcome, but you can always control yourself. And in that control, you find freedom. Freedom from reacting impulsively, freedom from unnecessary conflict, and freedom from carrying energy that isn't yours to carry. Learning to navigate these conversations with calm clarity and strength transforms not only the outcome of the discussion, but the way you experience every interaction in life. It allows you to engage without fear, respond without being hijacked by emotion, and walk away with dignity intact, no matter how charged the moment becomes. Ultimately, the goal is not to change the other person, it's to master the way you show up, to protect your peace, and to communicate in a way that aligns with who you truly are.